45 states are desperately trying to close budget gaps for fiscal year 2012, which could total a combined $125 billion. Certainly dire problems for those states, but it actually leaves 5 that are doing pretty well, relatively well. The lucky 5 are Arkansas, Alabama, Alaska, North Dakota, and Wyoming. Joining me now is the new governor of Wyoming, Republican Matt Mead. Governor Mead joins us from Washington, where he was attending the governor's conference, the governor's meeting with the president yesterday at the White House. Thank you for joining us, sir. Governor, Wyoming is one of 5 states that's not staring at a budget deficit this year. How much of that is linked or is a result of your natural resources, oil, gas, coal?
Well, Scarlett, thanks for having me on. There's no question it's linked to our natural resources, but we also have great tourism, great ag. We have a great fiscal conservative nature in Wyoming where we save money. And on top of that, we have no state income tax. We have no corporate income tax. We are viewed by many publications as one of the best states to do business. We've got new businesses coming in. So it's an entire picture. And certainly the mineral interest plays a big role on it. But that's half the picture, what you're getting in. The other half is what are you spending?
I do want to keep it on the minerals and energy for a moment here because we have rising energy prices. I would like to hear the pros and cons specifically on your budget from these rising oil prices.
Well, we worry about the rising energy prices because we want a full recovery in our states and in our country. But having said that, there's a lot that we can do. Number one is, we've had delayed drilling permits throughout Wyoming and throughout many oil-producing states. We need the federal government to be a partner in that rather than putting up hurdles where we can't do some of the drilling that we need to do. We have great coal reserves that we're getting delayed on. And, of course, oil prices and gas prices, they help our economy, but we're looking for a balance here, and what we want to be able to do is use those resources in a responsible way that balances the environment and balances the ability to have those resources developed. And what we face in Wyoming is a lot of delays, and it not only hurts Wyoming, it's hurting the country when we know that we have the resources there and we're not able to develop them.
Governor, I want to ask you also and bring in to our discussion what's going on in Wisconsin, the fight between the governor, the Republican governor, and the unionized state workers. To what extent could Wyoming face a similar standoff?
Well, I don't think that's going to be a factor in Wyoming. We are a right-to-work state, number one. Number two, we've been working very closely with our public employees, and they've said, listen, we understand that during the hard times, we may have to all make sacrifices, and during the good times, we want you to be there supporting us. And we have a good history in Wyoming of doing that with our public employees because we recognize their value. But we are not going to be facing those issues in Wyoming because we try to work well with all our people. Wyoming's a small state, and we try not to burn our bridges.
Yeah, 500,000 people in Wyoming, which also means
a little over 500,000.
Okay, roughly 500,000, a little over. Fewer state workers in general, which means a smaller amount of pension to fund. I know that last September, public employees began paying into their pension funds. Given what's happening in Wisconsin, would you start looking to ask state workers to contribute to health care plans and other costs?
Well, we just, as you pointed out, we just asked them to contribute. And in fact, in Wyoming now, we think we're in a pretty good position where we are. In fact, during this last legislative session, there was a consideration on what we could do to give some additional benefits in terms of bonus pay to some of our public employees. So I don't anticipate any great changes regarding benefits that are paid by the state of Wyoming in the near future.
Okay, gotcha. Also, let's bring in healthcare reform because that was certainly something that President Obama addressed yesterday during the meetings with the governors. I know you've been critical of his healthcare reform. He said yesterday that he supports states opting out of the federal law and coming up with their own plan provided they meet the same goals. Does that mean that Wyoming will pursue a waiver, so to speak?
Well, I think we very well could do that. And in fact, Wyoming has been working on its own plan for a couple of years. It's called Healthy Frontiers because we recognize it's not enough just to say no to the federal health care plan. We have to come up with a plan in Wyoming that fits Wyoming's needs. And we're working towards that, and we're going to continue to work towards that. I recognize health care is a big issue, but I am one of many governors that thinks it would be better controlled and developed within our own states rather than sort of a cookie-cutter approach out of Washington, D.C.
How different would a Wyoming health care plan look from the one instituted by the government, the federal government?
Well, one, we don't like the mandatory provision that you're required to buy health insurance. We'd have it more on a voluntary basis, and I think that is a big issue for Wyoming citizens. We don't want to be forced to buy something, but buy a product, so we would start there. Number two, we are a very rural state, and it's not enough just to say we have insurance for our people. We have challenges in making sure we have enough medical providers in our state, and so our needs would be tailored to both how do we get it affordable, how we meet pre-existing conditions, and how do we not just have the insurance, but have the providers in Wyoming necessary to meet the needs of our citizens.
Okay, and just to follow up here, because of this meeting taking place in Washington with all the governors, the governor of Wisconsin not attending the meeting, but what are you and the other governors out there talking about with regards to Wisconsin? What's the most interesting comment you've heard so far?
Well, I think that, there's just general agreement. Number one, this is what he campaigned on. Number two, as we face these challenges in our various states, whether Wyoming does or it doesn't, we have to recognize doesn't seem to be much benefit in having a state go bankrupt. So hard choices are definitely going to have to be made. I don't know all the history in Wisconsin. I don't know all the agreements were made, but I know Scott Walker. He campaigned on this, and he's holding the line. And so those are the tough choices he and the citizens of Wisconsin are going to have to make. And I would just say, in Wyoming, we appreciate our public workers, as does he, but we're in a better shape than he is. And without knowing all his details, we're always reluctant to tell another state what to do or not to do. But I know that he is doing exactly what he said he would do during the campaign.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Governor. We've been speaking with Governor Matt Mead of Wyoming. He was joining us from Washington.